The hydro weapons were their apex. The Space Marines didn't give a F. Before we start, leave a comment and tell us what city are you watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy! The acidic mist hissed across the crystalline barriers as Captain Thexra pressed his elongated snout against the observation port. His scaled fingers drummed nervously against the reinforced glass, watching the systematic destruction of everything his people had built over 3 millennia. "Status report," he growled, his forked tongue tasting the fear pheromones that filled the command bunker's recycled air. "Perimeter 7 has fallen, Captain. The Skthari deployed their hydro weapons again." Lieutenant Vexkaw's whiskers twitched as she spoke, her feline features drawn tight with exhaustion. "Our people, they're dissolving before they can even scream!" Thexra's canine pack had allied with the Kavari feline clan 6 months ago when the reptilian Skthari first arrived in the Deneb system. The cold-blooded bastards had swept through 4 systems already, their molecular disintegration weapons turning entire populations into bubbling soup. No species had found a defense against the hydrocannons. Matter simply ceased to exist when touched by that terrible green mist. "The refugees from the Ursine settlements report the same pattern," Vexkaw continued, her tail lashing nervously, anxiously. "The Skthari announce their terms for surrender, give exactly 72 hours, then begin systematic liquidation. No negotiations, no mercy." Through the observation port, Thexra could see the acid eating through their outer defensive walls like they were made of sugar. The Skthari moved with mechanical precision, their cold reptilian minds calculating the most efficient paths of destruction. In 18 hours, they would reach the civilian shelters. In 24, everyone he'd sworn to protect would be dead. "Sir!" Communications Officer Pipna burst into the command center, her small rodent form practically vibrating with excitement. "We're receiving a transmission! Unknown vessel approaching from the galactic rim!" Another refugee ship. Thexra's ears drooped. They barely had supplies for their current population. "Negative, sir! They're exciting permission to engage the Skthari fleet!" Vexkaw and Thexra exchanged glances. In 6 months of running from the reptilian advance, no species had volunteered to fight. The hydro weapons were simply too terrifying. "Put them through," Thexra ordered. The main screen crackled to life, revealing a face that made every being in the command center take an fearful, involuntary step backward. The creature was clearly sapient, but its features were utterly alien. Smooth, pale skin stretched over sharp bone structure. Small, predatory eyes that seemed to burn with some internal fire. And most disturbing of all, white fangs that it bared in what might have been meant as a smile. "This is Brother Captain Marcus Aurelius of the Imperial Fist's 3rd Company," the creature spoke in Gothic low, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested vocal cords evolved for aggressive intimidation. "We've intercepted Skthari communications. You require assistance." You're willing to fight the hydro weapons?" Thexra managed, his translator struggling with the alien's accent. The creature's expression didn't change, but something darker flickered behind its eyes. "The Emperor protects. We do not recognize Sclethari territorial claims. Prepare for orbital insertion. Before Thex-Ra could respond, the screen filled with an image that defied comprehension. A massive vessel, easily dwarfing the largest Kavari dreadnoughts, hung in space like a Gothic cathedral carved from black stone and gold. Gun batteries the size of city blocks tracked across its hull, and along its flanks the image of a golden gauntlet gleamed against yellow armor plating. "Sweet ancestors," whispered Vexka, "what species builds ships like that?" "Unknown vessel, this is Strike Commander Seth of the Sclethari Dominion. You will withdraw immediately or face liquidation. Our hydro weapons have never failed to dissolve any material they encounter." The pale creature, Marcus he'd called himself, tilted his head slightly. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of genuine curiosity. "Hydro weapons? You dissolve your enemies?" "Yes, molecular disintegration. No armor, no shield, no flesh can resist our science." "Interesting." Marcus paused, and when he continued, there was something that might have been sarcastic amusement in his tone. "We are the Adeptus Astartes. Confident, we do not dissolve." The transmission cut. What happened next would be burned into the memory of every survivor. The Imperial vessel, a battle barge they would later learn, didn't maneuver for optimal firing position or deploy defensive screens. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the center of the Sclethari formation, its engines leaving contrails of plasma that looked like golden fire. "They're committing desperate suicide," breathed Lieutenant Vexka. But as the first hydro cannon discharges met the Imperial vessel, something impossible happened. The green mist that had dissolved entire fleets simply dispersed. Where it touched the ship's hull, there were brief flashes of corrosive reaction, but the vessel continued its charge unimpeded. "How?" Thex-Ra's claws scraped against the observation port. "How are they surviving?" His answer came in the form of dozens of smaller craft launching from the battle barge's flanks. Drop pods, each one carrying what sensors indicated were individual life signs, screamed through the Sclethari hydro barrage like it was nothing more than morning mist. The first pod smashed directly through the bridge of a Sclethari destroyer. The second punched a hole in a cruiser's reactor section. Within minutes, the reptilian formation was scattered, individual ships reporting boarding actions by creatures that seemed to shrug off molecular disintegration. "Open a channel to the humans," Thex-Ra ordered. Hardly believing he was using that word. Humans? That's what the translator had called them. Marcus Aurelius appeared on screen again, but now he was clearly aboard a Sclethari vessel. Behind him, Thex-Ra could glimpse armored figures moving through smoke-filled corridors, and the sound of some kind of rapid-fire weapons echoed in the background. "Status report, Captain," Marcus said, calmly, as if he weren't in the middle of ship-to-ship combat. The hydro weapons," Thex-Ra stammered. "How are you surviving them?" "Surviving them?" Marcus actually smiled, and the expression was somehow more fearful than his previous blank stare. "Brother Sergeant, bring me a sample." A moment later, another armored figure appeared beside Marcus, carrying what appeared to be a standard hydrocannon power cell. The armored figure, easily 2 meters tall and bulked out to impossible proportions, casually twisted off the cell's safety cap and poured a measure of the green liquid into his palm. "This?" Marcus gestured to the acid that was now eating through the deck plating where it had spilled. "This is what has the galaxy so frightened?" And then, while every Xenos in the command center watched in disgusted, horrified fascination, the human lifted his hand and drank the molecular disintegration fluid like it was water. "Tastes like recaf," he commented, mildly. "Bit of a burn going down, but I've had worse." The transmission cut again, leaving the command center in surprised, absolute silence. "Sir," Pipnaw's voice was barely a whisper. What exactly are humans?" Before Thex Ra could attempt an answer, his communications array lit up with priority signals from across the system. Scathari vessels were surrendering. Others were attempting to flee, only to be run down by human boarding craft that seemed to treat vacuum exposure as a minor inconvenience. But the most disturbing report came from the surface of Deneb Prime itself, where the main Scathari ground forces had been preparing for the final assault on civilian shelters. "Sir," came the nervous, shaking voice of Surface Commander Yip To, a beaver-like Castorian who had never lost his composure in 40 years of military service. "The humans, they're not using dropships for planetary assault." "What do you mean?" "They're surprised, jumping from orbit without atmospheric entry gear." Thex Ra stared at the tactical display, showing dozens of bright streaks falling toward the planet's surface at terminal velocity. "That's impossible. Nothing survives atmospheric entry without proper shielding." "Sir, they're not just surviving. They're using the impact craters as confident foxholes." The Scari delegation huddled in the corner of their own command center, watching in disgusted, horrified fascination as Brother Sergeant Marcus demonstrated proper combat knife maintenance to 3 surprised, wide-eyed, beaver-like engineers. The Space Marine's massive ceramite armor made soft scraping sounds as he methodically sharpened the blade. "See? You want to keep the edge at exactly 45 degrees, Marcus explained with the gentle patience of a teacher, his voice booming through the Vox grill. "Serious, Emperor's enemies don't give you time for dull blades." Chief Engineer Bracktail trembled as he accepted the knife, nearly dropping it. The weapon was easily half his body weight. "But, honored human, this blade is longer than my entire torso." "Combat knife," Marcus corrected, cheerfully. "Wait until you see a chainsword." Captain Whiskertooth of the Scari military watched this exchange with growing unease. His species had evolved from semi-aquatic mammals, building their civilization in the vast river networks of Scaros Prime. They were peaceful, methodical, excellent engineers. Violence was theoretical to them. The reptilian hegemony had changed that. "Your reinforcements," Whiskertooth began, carefully. "How many warriors did the Imperium send?" Brother Sergeant Marcus looked up from his impromptu weapons lesson. "Full tactical squad, Captain. 10 battle brothers." The silence stretched painfully. 10, Whiskertooth repeated, slowly. "Against a hegemony invasion fleet of 300 vessels and 2 million ground troops." "Sounds about right for a Tuesday," Marcus nodded, though Brother Titus did mention he was hoping for more of a challenge this rotation. The Scari captain's whiskers twitched in what his species recognized as barely controlled panic. These humans were clearly insane. Magnificent warriors, certainly, but completely detached from reality. A klaxon wailed across the command center. Tactical Officer Flattail's voice cracked as she announced, "Reptilian advance forces have breached Sector 7. They're deploying hydro weapons." The Scari leadership exchanged looks of despair. Hydro weapons were the hegemony's most feared technology. Concentrated acid projectiles that could dissolve ceramics, metals, even organic matter in seconds. Nothing survived direct contact. Marcus stood up, his 2-meter frame casting a shadow across the entire command station. Hydro weapons? Acid? The deadliest chemical warfare in known space, Whiskertooth confirmed, grimly. One drop can melt through our strongest barriers. When they deploy hydro weapons, we evacuate entire sectors. The Space Marine's helmet tilted slightly. Through the Vox grill came a sound that took the Scari several moments to identify. Playful laughter. "Brother Vex," Marcus called across the command center. "Did you hear that? They've got acid weapons." Another Space Marine, distinguished by the Medicae symbol on his shoulder, looked up from where he'd been examining Scari medical equipment with professional curiosity. "Really? What concentration?" Unknown, Flattail stammered. "But lethal on contact?" Brother Vex approached, each footstep making the deck plates ring.
Fascinating. We should collect samples for analysis. Are you, Chief Engineer Bracktail swallowed hard, are you planning to retreat to minimum safe distance? Both Space Marines looked at him with what could only be described as confused amusement. "Retreat?" Marcus asked. "From acid? Brother, my stomach lining processes stronger stuff than that every morning." The tactical display suddenly lit up with proximity warnings. 12 hegemony assault craft were descending directly toward their position, hydro weapon signatures blazing across the scanner readouts. "They're targeting the command center," Flattail squeaked. "All defensive positions fall back to—" "Belay that," Marcus interrupted calmly. He activated his Voxcom. "All brothers, this is Marcus. We have acid-based hostiles incoming. Remember, Codex Astartes, Chapter 12, Section 4.
The responding voices crackled through the comm system with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. "Copy that, Brother Sergeant." "Finally, something interesting." "Has anyone tried the local water? It's quite refreshing." Whiskertooth felt his world surprised tilt. You're not evacuating?" Marcus began checking his bolt pistol with methodical precision. "Captain, my battle brothers and I were forged in the fires of 10,000 worlds. We've fought demons that bleed liquid fire, orcish squigs that spit industrial acid, and tyrannid bioweapons that dissolve armor on molecular levels." He looked directly at the Scari captain. "Your reptilian friends are about to learn why the Emperor's Space Marines don't retreat." The first hegemony assault craft touched down 200 meters from the command center. Reptilian troops poured out in perfect formation, their scaled forms moving with cold precision. Each warrior carried a hydroprojector, sleek weapons that hummed with contained chemical death. Through the command center's reinforced windows, the Scari watched in mounting terror as their compound's outer barriers began dissolving under concentrated acid fire. Metal screamed as it liquefied. Concrete bubbled and ran like water. "Emperor preserve us," Whiskertooth whispered. "He will," Marcus said, simply. "He always does." The reptilian advance reached the main courtyard. Their commander, a 2.5-meter-tall specimen with ceremonial scarring, raised his hydroprojector and spoke in the cold, sibilant language of the hegemony. The translation matrix rendered his words, "Mammals of Scaros Prime, you have 30 seconds to surrender before we dissolve your pathetic command structure." The outer doors exploded inward as Brother Titus simply walked through them. The blast-rated barrier, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, crumpled like paper under his armored shoulder. "Good morning," Titus called cheerfully to the assembled reptilian force. "Lovely day for purging Xenos, isn't it?" The reptilian commander's cold eyes widened in genuine shock. Nothing should have survived the acid bombardment they'd just unleashed on that entrance. Titus looked down at his armor, where drops of concentrated acid were still smoking and bubbling. "Oh, this?" He brushed off the corrosive liquid like dust. "Brother Marius, you were right. It does tingle a bit." More Space Marines emerged from various positions around the compound. Brother Vex appeared to have come straight through what used to be a surprised, perfectly marine-shaped hole. Surprised. Brother Constantine emerged from the underground storage areas, casually carrying what appeared to be a scary food storage container. "Brothers," Constantine announced, "the local engineering corps stocks an excellent fermented fruit beverage. Very smooth finish. Playful." The reptilian troops raised their hydroprojectors in unison, cold discipline overriding their obvious confusion. Their commander hissed orders, and concentrated acid death filled the air. Through the command center's tactical display, the Scari watched streams of chemical fire splash harmlessly against ceramide armor. Where the acid touched, it bubbled and steamed, and the Space Marines kept walking. "Surprised," Whiskertooth breathed. "Nothing survives direct hydro-weapon contact." Brother Vex's voice carried clearly across the Vox channel. "Brothers, I'm reading sulfuric base with trace heavy metals, roughly 15% concentration. Quite mild, really." "Is it safe for consumption?" Brother Constantine inquired with professional interest. "I wouldn't recommend it as a beverage," Vex replied, thoughtfully, "but it's certainly not going to harm us through dermal contact." The reptilian commander's discipline finally cracked. In their own language, which the Space Marines' auto-translators rendered faithfully, he screamed, "What are these monsters?" Brother Sergeant Marcus stepped forward, his bolt pistol held casually at his side. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "We are Space Marines. We are the Emperor's wrath made manifest. We are what stands between humanity and the dark." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "And your acid tastes like Brotherhood training rations. We've had worse." The reptilian forces began to back away, their cold discipline replaced by something the Scari had never seen in hegemony troops: fear. But their retreat was cut short as the remaining 8 Space Marines emerged from positions the Scari hadn't even known existed. They had somehow flanked the entire reptilian force while walking casually through concentrated chemical fire. "Now then," Marcus continued conversationally, "shall we discuss the terms of your immediate departure from Scari space?" The alien commander's response was to raise his weapon for a final, desperate assault. The hydroprojector's capacitors whined as it charged for maximum discharge. Brother Titus stepped directly into the firing line. The weapon fired. Concentrated acid, strong enough to dissolve a battle tank, struck the Space Marine's center mass. Steam rose from his armor in thick clouds. The chemical fire covered his entire torso, eating away at ceramide plating that had survived orbital bombardment. Titus looked down at his chest, where the acid was still bubbling energetically. Then he licked his gauntlet. "Definitely sulfuric base," he confirmed to Brother Vex, "though I'm detecting some interesting trace minerals, almost refreshing." The reptilian commander's weapon fell from nerveless claws. "The Emperor protects," Marcus said, simply,
raising his bolt pistol. What happened next would become legend among the Skari for generations. But in the command center, watching through tactical displays and direct observation, Chief Engineer Bracktail asked the question that would haunt his dreams. What kind of world creates beings like this? The answer would come soon enough, when the surviving reptilian forces sent their desperate transmission to the main hegemony fleet. Abort invasion! Repeat, abort invasion! The mammals have allied with demons who drink acid and walk through fire. We cannot win. But first, there was the matter of 10 Space Marines facing 2 million reptilian invaders. Captain Thaddeus wiped the corrosive liquid from his helmet visor with casual indifference. The Scolari's most feared weapon, their legendary hydro-acid launchers, had just drenched his entire squad. The reptilians hissed in satisfaction, expecting to watch the mammals dissolve into screaming puddles. Instead, Brother Maximus pulled off his helmet and took a deep gulp of the burning acid.
"Tastes like home," he grunted, spitting out a chunk of melted ceramite. "Reminds me of that tavern on Catachan. What was it called, Captain?" "The Screaming Grox," Thaddeus replied, advancing through another wave of acid spray, "though their rotgut was stronger than this." High Admiral Whiskers felt his whiskers twitch uncontrollably. He'd fought alongside many species, but watching these Space Marines treat weapons-grade acid like recreational beverages was breaking his surprise understanding of basic biology. "Impossible!" shrieked Seth Commander Vex, his serpentine form coiled behind a barrier of crystalline shields. "That acid dissolves starship hulls!" "Yeah?" Brother Maximus belched, green foam bubbling from his lips. "Sarcastic. You should try Fenrisian ale. That shit can eat through power armor from the inside."
The feline defenders? The feline defenders watched in surprised, stunned silence as the 5 remaining Space Marines continued their methodical advance. They'd lost half their number to the Scolari ambush, but the survivors showed no sign of slowing down. If anything, they seemed annoyed that their armor was getting dissolved. "Secondary weapons," Vex commanded. "Release the neural toxins!" Crystalline canisters shattered against the Marines, releasing clouds of purple gas designed to shut down mammalian nervous systems. The Space Marines walked through it like morning mist. "That tickles," Brother Cassius observed, his exposed face already showing chemical burns that were healing in real time. "Though it's no match for Nurgle's rot. Now that was a plague worth remembering." Admiral Whisker's tactical mind reeled. He'd studied the Scolari for decades, knew their bioweapons could kill a Tauran bull in seconds. These humans were not just surviving, they were critiquing the chemical composition. Brother Maximus suddenly stopped mid-strive and sniffed the air. "Captain, you smell that?" "Pheromone markers," Thaddeus confirmed. "Classic ambush scent. Probably got a whole nest of them behind those rocks." The Scolari had indeed prepared their ultimate trap. 36 warriors emerged from camouflaged positions, surrounding the Marines with a forest of gleaming claws and acid-dripping fangs. Vex's forked tongue tasted confident victory in the air. "Surrender, mammals. You are outnumbered 7-1. Captain Thaddeus looked around at the encircling reptilians, then at his 4 remaining brothers. A slow grin spread across his scarred features. "Boys, remember what Chaplain Grimaldus used to say? When surrounded by the enemy, you have targets in every direction," the Marines quoted in unison. What happened next would be talked about in feline military academies for generations. The Space Marines didn't form a defensive circle or seek cover. They charged. All of them, in different directions. Brother Cassius grabbed a Scolari warrior by the throat and used him as a club to beat 3 others. Brother Maximus caught a claw strike bare-handed and proceeded to arm wrestle the reptilian while punching another with his free hand. Captain Thaddeus found himself facing Vex personally, the reptilian commander's twin acid swords weaving deadly patterns. The blades connected repeatedly, slicing through ceramite-like cloth, but Thaddeus kept coming. "You should be dead," Vex hissed, his weapons dripping with human blood. Yeah, well, Thaddeus caught one of the swords bare-handed, acid burning through his palm. I've been getting that complaint for about 2 centuries now. The captain's power fist connected with Vex's chest, launching the reptilian commander through a crystal formation. But even as Thaddeus turned, more Scolari were pouring from hidden tunnels. Dozens more. Then hundreds. Admiral Whiskers activated his communicator with shaking paws. "This is Whiskers to all units. Prepare emergency evacuation. The humans are about to be overrun." "Negative on that evacuation," Thaddeus's voice crackled through the comm. "We're just getting warmed up." The Space Marines had formed a rough circle now, not for defense, but to ensure they could reach every enemy. They were actually laughing as thousands of Scolari poured into the cavern system. "Contact!" "Brother Maximus!" shouted gleefully. "I count at least 2,000 hostiles!" "Emperor's teeth!" Cassius replied. "It's like Christmas morning!" Admiral Whiskers watched his tactical display in fearful horror as red contacts multiplied exponentially. The entire Scolari force was converging on this position, every reptilian warrior on the planet responding to some kind of hive call. But the Space Marines' vital signs remained steady. Their heart rates were actually calm. "How are you so calm?" Whiskers transmitted desperately. "You're about to face the entire Scolari army." "Admiral," Captain Thaddeus replied, his voice carrying the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child, "do you know what a Space Marine is?" Before Whiskers could answer, the first wave hit. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a natural disaster with power armor. The Space Marines moved through the Scolari ranks like chainswords through cloth, leaving trails of carnage that, surprised, defied tactical analysis. They fought for 3 hours straight. No rest, no resupply, no medical aid. When their ammunition ran out, they used their weapons as clubs. When their clubs broke, they used pieces of dead Scolarius clubs. When those ran out, they used their fists. The turning point came when Brother Maximus, covered in so much alien blood that his armor's original color was indiscernible, grabbed a fleeing Scolari and bit its throat out. The reptilians broke. Not retreated, not regrouped, broke. The sight of a mammal using their own hunting techniques against them triggered something primal in their cold-blooded psychology. The survivors fled in complete panic, abandoning weapons, wounded, and any semblance of military discipline. In the sudden silence, Captain Thaddeus surveyed the cavern floor, which was now carpeted with reptilian corpses. His remaining Marines stood among the dead, barely breathing hard. "Well," he said, conversationally, "that was invigorating." Admiral Whiskers materialized via hologram, his feline features surprised, slack with shock. "Captain, my sensors indicate you just eliminated over 4,000 enemy combatants." "Sounds about right,"
Thaddeus shrugged. Though Brother Cassius got greedy with his count, I saw him double-tap at least a dozen. They were still moving, Cassius protested. Reflex action doesn't count toward your tally, brother. Whiskers' ears flattened against his head. You're discussing kill counts after what just happened? Standard procedure, Maximus explained, calm, helpfully. Though I have to admit, these Scalari were disappointingly fragile. Remember those orc wogs on Armageddon? Now those were proper opponents. The Admiral's tactical mind finally caught up with what he'd witnessed. Captain, I need to ask, what exactly are you? Thaddeus considered the question seriously. We are the Emperor's angels of death. We are his wrath made manifest, his judgment given form. We know no fear, for we are fear incarnate to his enemies. He paused, then added more casually, also, we're from Earth. Earth? Whiskers' whiskers twitched. Your homeworld? Death world, technically. Brother Cassius corrected. Everything there tries to kill you from the moment you're born. The air, the water, the wildlife, the plants, the weather, the geology. Really builds character. You mean to tell me, Admiral Whiskers said, slowly, that you come from a planet where survival is a desperate struggle? Oh, no, Thaddeus laughed. Earth's not that bad anymore. We domesticated most of it centuries ago. Now we recruit from the really nasty worlds. Catachan, Fenris, Cretaceous, places where the trees shoot back and the rain is flammable. The Admiral sat down heavily on his haunches. And you do this voluntarily? Best job in the galaxy, Maximus grinned. Travel to exotic locations, meet interesting species, kill them for the Emperor. Plus, the dental plan is excellent. 3 days later, Admiral Whiskers stood in his flag bridge, watching the human strike cruiser prepare to depart. The Scalari threat was over. Word had spread through their communication networks about what had happened in the cavern. Entire fleets were fleeing the sector. Admiral, his aide approached. Nervously, the humans are requesting one final meeting. Captain Thaddeus appeared on the main screen, looking surprisingly formal in his dress uniform. Admiral Whiskers, on behalf of the Imperium of Man, I wanted to thank you and your people for your assistance in this operation. Our assistance? Whiskers' voice cracked. Captain, you single-handedly eliminated an entire Scalari invasion force. Team effort, Thaddeus replied diplomatically. Your intelligence was invaluable. In recognition of this cooperation, the Adeptus Astartes would like to offer a formal military alliance. The Admiral's ears, hopeful, perked up. An alliance with beings who could treat weapons-grade acid as a beverage? That would be acceptable. Excellent. Oh, and Admiral? Yes, Captain. Thaddeus's scarred features split into a genuinely warm smile. If you ever find yourselves facing impossible odds again, don't hesitate to call. We love impossible odds. As the human ship disappeared into warp space, Admiral Whiskers made a note in his personal log. First Contact Protocol Amendment. Under no circumstances should humanity ever be considered hostile. Also, stock up on antacids if inviting them to diplomatic dinners. In the depths of space, Captain Thaddeus reviewed their mission report. Another successful operation, another Xenos threat neutralized, another potential ally gained for the Emperor's glory. Brother Maximus approached with a concerned expression. Captain, I've been thinking about those Scalari bioweapons. What about them?
Do you think we should have mentioned that their weapons-grade acid was actually weaker than standard Astartes digestive supplements? Thaddeus considered this. No, I think we'll let them figure that out on their own. Wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. The Space Marines shared a ha-ha-ha-ha as their ship bore them toward the next impossible mission, the next hopeless battle, the next glorious victory for the God Emperor of mankind. After all, they were human, and humans, fuck yeah! 3 Terran years later, aboard the Leonine flagship Pride's Dawn. Captain Veltar of the Leonine Coalition stood before the massive viewport, watching human battle barges dock with practiced efficiency. His golden mane had grown fuller since the Hydro Wars, streaked now with premature silver, a mark of command earned through fire and brotherhood.
Still watching them like they're mythical creatures? Chirped Navigator Kesra, her avian features bright with amusement as she perched nearby. The Aquilin had taken to wearing small imperial aquilas on her flight feathers, a fashion that had somehow spread across half the Coalition worlds. Can you blame me? Veltar's ears twitched with fond exasperation. Yesterday I watched Brother Sergeant Magnus headbutt a void kraken to death. A void kraken, Kesra. They're supposed to be impossible to kill in vacuum. The bridge crew, a mixed collection of Leonine, Aquilin, Ursine, and even some of the newer Cetacean allies, shared knowing looks. Everyone had their human stories now. Through the viewport, they could see Space Marines in pristine blue and gold armor moving with mechanical precision. Their movements, somehow both perfectly disciplined and utterly terrifying. The Leonine had learned to read Imperial heraldry. These were Ultramarines, one of the calm chapters, according to their human allies. The bovine agricultural worlds reported a 340% increase in crop yields, reported Communications Officer Thane, his massive Ursine frame hunched over multiple displays. Apparently, the humans taught them something called crop rotation and introduced them to fertilizer. They're calling it the Green Miracle. Veltar nodded absently. The humans had that effect. Wherever they went, impossible things became routine. The Coalition had gone from a struggling defensive alliance to the dominant power in 3 sectors. Not through conquest. The humans seemed genuinely baffled by the concept of unprovoked aggression against friendlies, but through what they called confident cooperative security. The reptilian hegemony had collapsed within 18 months, not from military defeat alone, but from something far more devastating. Their slave species had seen humans fight and die for alien allies they'd known for mere hours. The revolution had been energetic and absolute. Captain, Kesra's voice carried a note of wonder. Long-range sensors are picking up a Tyrannid splinter fleet. High fleet, they're calling it Glutton. 300 bioships, maybe more. The bridge fell silent. Even after years of alliance, the sight of a Tyrannid fleet still sent primal fear through every non-human heart. The great devourer, the hunger that consumes worlds, the swarm that... Sir! Thane's voice cracked slightly. I'm receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through. The Vox crackled to life with a voice that had become confident across Coalition space. Captain Titus of the Ultramarines' Second Company, the human who had stood with them at Hydro Prime when their worlds burned. Coalition forces, this is Captain Titus. We have visual confirmation of Hive Fleet Glutton, estimated arrival at the Leonine homeworld in 72 hours. A pause, then something that might have been amusement colored the Vox. All Imperial forces are moving to intercept. We could use some backup if you're not too busy. Veltar found himself grinning, showing fangs. Around him, the bridge crew straightened with hopeful anticipation rather than fear. That was the human gift. They made the impossible seem like just another day at the office. All Coalition fleets, this is Captain Veltar. Set course for intercept, full military burn. He paused, then added something that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. For the Coalition! For the Imperium! For humanity, Kesra added, hopefully, and the phrase was taken up across the bridge. Through the viewport, human ships powered up with angry red light, their prows turning toward the approaching darkness. Somewhere in that fleet, Brother Sergeant Magnus was probably loading his bolt pistol and complaining about bugs. Captain Titus would be calculating firing solutions and probable casualty rates with the same calm he used to discuss the weather. The Tyranids were coming. They had devoured 1,000 worlds, consumed entire civilizations, turned proud species into biomass. But they had never faced Deathworlders who considered a 90% casualty rate acceptable losses. They had never fought alongside warriors who would rather die than confident abandon a friend. They had never encountered beings who looked at a hive fleet and said, "Hold my recaf!" As the Coalition armada turned toward battle, Veltar allowed himself a moment of profound gratitude. The galaxy was still dark, still full of horrors beyond counting, but in that darkness, humanity burned like a defiant star. Not bright enough to illuminate everything, but bright enough to show others how to kindle their own flames. The Hydro Wars had ended with poison turned to drink. The Tyranid Wars would end with hunger turned to ash. Because humans, Emperor bless their stubborn souls, simply didn't know when to quit. And neither anymore did their confident friends.